Hello, and welcome to our monthly webinar hosted by Spingo. My name is Colin Mathis, and I'm the Content Marketing Manager here, and I thank you for joining us today. This is a free monthly webinar series where we present ideas and methods to help event makers promote, market, and manage their events. If you're joining us for the first time, thanks for being here, and welcome back to those who have attended before. Today we are discussing volunteers, specifically focused on how to find, work with, and retain awesome volunteers for your events. Before we get started, please note that you're welcome to submit any comments or questions via the GoToWebinar panel. We will be having a brief Q&A following the presentation in order to answer those questions. We are also recording today's webinar, which will be available later for on-demand viewing. Look out for an email with the video link that will be available sometime after the conclusion of this webinar. Now, I'm excited to introduce today's presenter, Sydnee Ochoa, the community liaison at Kids on the Move, where she works to connect the community with many services Kids on the Move has to offer children with developmental delays. For the past 2 years, Sydnee has managed all volunteers for the organization and has planned many Kids on the Move's events such as fundraisers, community outreach events, public relations, social media, and radio campaigns. She oversees more than 1,500 volunteers annually, including corporations, Eagle Scout candidates, high school and university students, and church and family groups. Sydnee, I'll turn the time over to you.
Thanks, Colin. We're happy to be here. We've worked with Spingo in the past, and it's nice to be able to give this webinar and give back a little bit to the community at large. So we're just going to be focusing on volunteers and specifically in the aspect of event management. There's a lot of aspects to volunteers from our world, our nonprofit world, but we're going to be mostly focusing just on events today. And so just as an overview, I'm just going to highlight a couple things. You'll see what we're going to be going over here on our bullet point list here, but I'll be mostly talking about recruitment and also placing volunteers and, of course, event day and follow-up. And so those are our main things here that we're going to be talking about today. And so let's get started. Before we begin, I just wanted to explain who Kids on the Move is. We are a nonprofit organization in Utah County, and we serve over 2,500 children annually who have developmental delays due to birth defects, birth problems, due to maybe low-income families that can't provide resources, and therefore their children are delayed in their development. We also work with children with autism. And so it's a really rewarding organization to work for, and it's been a great ride. We're actually in our 30th year. This August we'll be celebrating our 30th anniversary, and so that's a big milestone we're hitting. And as far as some statistics for our volunteers go, each year we have between 1,000 and 1,500 volunteers that come through our doors, whether that's through events or helping in our service programs and therapies. Last year, our number was close to 4,000 hours in 2015 that we tracked. And that's an incredible number. It's amazing to see how many people are getting involved. But it does take some effort behind the scenes to manage all those volunteers. Just for reference, for those who are trying to get volunteers more involved in their organization, the value of a volunteer, according to the Utah Commission on Service and Volunteerism, is actually $26 an hour. So that can add up to more than hundreds of thousands of dollars in annual savings for your organization. They're a vital part of our organization, and we try to find the best practices to keep them coming back. It helps us be able to provide the best services to kids. And so we're just going to be talking about a couple tips and tricks that we've found are helpful in our organization, and hopefully those who are participating today can find ways to apply that to their own organizations or their own companies with their own event needs. So the first thing that we'll that we'll cover is kind of the pre-event. We're going to be talking about a to-do list, basically. Before you do a to-do list, though, you need to have an objective. You need to know why you're doing this event, and everyone involved needs to be on the same page. If everyone is on the same page and knows that objective, then things will go more smoothly. And this also includes your volunteers. We're going to be talking about orienting volunteers according to your cause and your objective, but we want to make sure that's always in the back of our minds so that the event is clear to those that you're promoting it to in the community and those that are involved of why this is happening. And so when we have a to-do list, we want to make sure that we're setting deadlines. One thing I do is I create just a simple to-do list in an Excel spreadsheet, and I formulate it so that it'll show up when deadlines are fast approaching. And then what we do is we delegate that out to our staff that's on our development team who's planning these events, staff that are in our organization, and also we delegate to volunteers. You don't have to just use volunteers on event day, but you can have them help as you're leading up to the event to help plan these things. As an example, we reached out to the local university, Brigham Young University, and they have a nonprofit management program. And some of the students were actually assigned to our organization for a whole semester. And these students were trained in nonprofit management. They were interested in learning more about event planning and things, and they were able to help us gain more donations and sponsorships. They were able to help us recruit volunteers. They helped us with a lot of the logistical planning, and it was a huge, huge effort on their part. And we were glad to have the help. As nonprofits, we usually wear a lot of hats, and sometimes you may feel stretched as you're planning events. And it's nice to utilize those volunteers, bringing in professionals who want to give back. It doesn't have to be students. Utilizing those skills is great. And as I mentioned before, using the staff in your organization to have a committee. You don't have to just keep your event planners, overly tasked. You can have staff help, and that actually gets them more involved and keeps things going smoothly. A lot of you may be watching this webinar, and I know I would be, because maybe you've had some setbacks with volunteers in the past. We've had some events, unfortunately, where we had many volunteers signed up and ready to go, and day of we had maybe 5 show up, and it was a learning experience for us to see what we could change. And so we've noticed that a couple things happen when volunteers decide not to show or that they don't follow through on assignments. And some of that can be based on how we lead up to recruitment. So we want to really focus on recruitment. One of the big things is lack of follow-up. We want to make sure that we're staying in communication with our volunteers, especially with big groups. Sometimes the sign-up process can be confusing. Sometimes it's not very clear how to sign up or how to get communication again with the volunteer management or the event organizers. And so keeping that streamlined as much as possible. We'll talk about that a little bit more. It's also, we're going to be talking about how to match volunteers to their interests and their skill levels. Maybe they just wanted to get some service hours for a class and they weren't expecting to have to do so much that they were assigned. Or maybe they thought that it was below their skill level and they didn't feel like they were actually connected to what was going on. So we'll be talking about that as well. And the last one is also just making sure, again, that everybody's on the same page with your cause and your objectives of the event and the mission of your organization. In this photo, we had an event where we had a local superhero party for all kids that we've ever served past the past 29 years last year. And so the children dressed up as their local superheroes, policemen, firemen. And we had a great response when we reached out to the policemen and the firemen and the other emergency officials. They came out and did a great thing for the community. We had a lot of emergency officials there. And I think because the event was focused on highlighting local superheroes and connecting to the little children in our community with special needs, they felt the heart of the event. And so those volunteer emergency officials were able to come and and really make a difference at that event. And it was very successful. And it worked out for a very cute picture too. Okay, and so with some recruitment, we want to get into the nitty gritty. The first thing we want to mention, just as a side note, we want to just highlight that all research studies on volunteering and giving have discovered that people were more than 4 times as likely to volunteer when they were personally asked. Sometimes when we're leading up to sending out an ask for volunteers, we don't realize that we need to make it personal. And so I want to highlight just a couple groups that we found have really worked out well for volunteers. The main one being corporate groups. That's local companies or even some larger companies that have a corporate social responsibility or a community involvement initiative. It's amazing how many companies actually have this, and they're looking for opportunities to volunteer and they're just not sure where to go. And so we've found some success with some very large companies like Adobe, Kohl's, Target, and Walmart, and also Goldman Sachs. And the list is always growing. So don't be afraid to reach out to those big companies in your area. Also, having your staff check with their spouses or their friends who work for other companies, it's best to have a personal connection in some way. Another thing, as I mentioned, was checking with local colleges and universities using their service learning programs or their volunteering centers. That's a huge thing that we use. We actually work with the Volunteer Service Center at Brigham Young University, and they call themselves YServe. And what they do is they assign students to be over our organization and recruit for our organization. And so each week they have an assigned time to come to some of our events that we have regularly happening. And it's been a great setup. We have the one contact person and they come without fail. If something's happening, they know who to call. And it's a great system. Also, as many of you may have already reached out to, scout troops and family groups and church groups, they're always looking for ways to serve. We've had a lot of Eagle Scouts help us throughout the events and throughout the years as well. One thing that we're trying to focus on even more at Kids on the Move is our social media outreach. And we've recently gotten involved with a couple organizations that work to spread the word about volunteer opportunities. One that you may want to look into that we found is very helpful is volunteermatch.org. That one is a free site that organizations can sign up for and post volunteer opportunities, and volunteers can match according to their interests and contact you for more information. It's been a great thing that we've just started rolling out recently. Another thing I want to highlight that's not listed here is just remembering word of mouth and your reputation in the community. And again, I am focusing more into the nonprofit world, but this also can apply to organizations and companies in the for-profit world. Volunteer recruitment has so much to do with PR and quality of services. There's so many times that I ask a volunteer how they heard about us, and they say, well, my child came and received services 20 years ago, and I just want to give back because you helped us out so much. And so it's really just a full circle of the quality of services that you're giving to the community and the word of mouth that spreads and just the great experience people have, they want to come back. And that's kind of been our way of retaining volunteers. And so the next step we want to focus on, we've talked about the who to recruit and now the when. We actually start planning our large events upwards of 5 months in advance. And about 3 months prior to the events is when we start really hitting hard to recruit. We're always making mention of groups or contacts that we're talking to throughout the year, and we're mentioning events, but as of 3 months, we're full steam ahead looking for volunteers and recruiting. And then as it gets closer, we usually do a follow-up 1 month out, and then 2 weeks out, 1 week out, and the day of. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. We're usually communicating with one contact person, and we're also providing some orientation and training prior, so everything goes smoothly day of. And then how to recruit. There's 3 main principles that we found are really helpful in making sure recruitment is successful. And that's first stating your need. a very clear need of what kind of volunteers you need or what they would be impacting in your organization. And then also a clear position description of how they can help. So, for example, they would be helping pass out water at a marathon, or they would be helping at a registration table for the participants of your event. And then your third is benefits. What are the volunteers going to be receiving, whether that's a uh, tangible thing like a T-shirt or free food, or if that's something like a social experience or some job experience to put on their resume. And so we want to get into the how a little bit better, how to recruit all-star volunteers. And we've got so many great groups that work with us. The best way to get that going is actually to meet with the decision makers in that organization. I'm mostly talking about the companies here with their corporate social responsibility outreaches, finding the person who's in charge of that and scheduling a way for them to come and have a tour of your nonprofit organization, of your facility. Getting them to see the heart of what you do is a great way to get them involved with your cause and want to help with your events. On that tour, then you can sit down and explain the need, like we talked about. The need needs to be connected to your cause. An example of this is Adobe. We have a contact there at Adobe who then is able to relay back to his team on different events that are coming up. And through that contact, we actually found out that some of his employees had children that came and received services at Kids on the Move. And so they also were able to help recruit their coworkers to come. And we usually have at some of our events upwards of 60 volunteers come and stay and help with these volunteer management type events. And the next is, again, keeping that clear and frequent communication. In your communication, you'll want to be sending out confirmation emails and links to registration pages, making sure that you test ahead of time the registration process. Moving into the next point, we had an example of a marathon that asked us to be the beneficiary. And they asked us to recruit some volunteers to help offset their costs and be able to donate more back to our cause. And so we recruited quite a few, but we got word from our volunteers we recruited that they didn't know how to register. And so no one was sure how many volunteers actually showed up, and it ended up being kind of chaotic. But we learned from that, and we've been working with the marathon organizers, and we think we found a good way using some of the tips we're talking about today to keep that streamlined and making sure the volunteers are happy, but also that the event is meeting its needs with the volunteers. You can use websites, you can use CRM, customer relationship management systems to organize that. You can use just simple Excel spreadsheets using phone or email signups. And also the next point is having a defined contact person for large groups. I mentioned Adobe. Also, this picture is of Goldman Sachs. They help us we do a corporate sports challenge where we have companies come in and compete for a good cause, and they play sports all day. And Goldman Sachs for years has been our referee group. And what happens is one contact person is assigned from Goldman Sachs and they contact us. We send out a list of all of the different sports. And what they do is they worked with their team to sign up ahead of time. So they'll have 2 people assigned to soccer, for example, and 2 people assigned to basketball. And then they send us that back, and we have that on event day. So we know exactly where everybody is. We know exactly what they're doing, and they know ahead of time what they're doing as well. The last point we want to mention, we talked about the pitfalls of volunteer recruitment. Sometimes there's some people that don't show up. It's good to plan for that. Plan for about a 10% attrition rate, a no-show rate. Some things are just going to come up. But we have noticed that if you have a backup plan, it won't throw you off. And also, if you're doing these steps that we mentioned prior of recruitment, they'll know what their job is. They're going to know what their contribution is to the event, and they're more likely to feel responsibility for that and show up. And if they can't, they'll probably notify you because they'll feel that if they are going to fall through, then that is going to affect your event. So if they're feeling that heart and the cause that you are involved in, they're going to show up more often. And we've had some great examples of volunteers who felt so bad and they actually recruited some of their friends to go in their place. And that was so great to see them following through like that. So now we just want to move on again, as we're talking about feeling the heart and the cause. What are some motivations for volunteers? And why are they coming to your event? Why do they want to participate? Sometimes, well, we want to always remember that we want to treat them as individuals and not just as chess pieces in your event logistics. We want to give them challenging assignments. We want to give them things that are interesting and not just picking up trash, which is important, but they also want to feel that they're involved in actually seeing a direct contribution to your event. Sometimes they want to be able to freshen up their professional skills. They also want to, again, be involved in a cause. Maybe they're really involved in um, autism awareness in the community, and they find out that you work with that. Or, refugee. There's so many nonprofits with so many great causes. They're searching for those and asking if you have events. Sometimes, and I remember being a college student, they're just kind of in it for the free incentives. I sometimes signed up to be a volunteer because I wanted a free T-shirt, and so knowing that they are just there for that, that's okay. You still need their help, but maybe not giving them as large of a responsibility, because they will do what needs to be done, but maybe just the bare minimum, and giving the ones that are more motivated the larger tasks. Everyone's looking for a good time, a social interaction. They want to be able to have fun. In this photo at our local superhero event, we had some people that got so behind our cause, they came dressed up. We still don't know who the Spider-Man guy is. He got involved. He got in with the kids. He got them so excited and he was entertaining them. And it was so fun to see a volunteer in the community who is still a mystery man, just as Spider-Man is. We still don't know his identity, but it's been fun to see people just get behind things. So if Spider-Man's listening, we'd love to know who you are. And so moving to a different aspect of volunteer management, we want to remember our staff, our paid staff that are in our nonprofit organizations or in our companies. Making sure that staff know how to interact with volunteers and having them work with them side by side is so important. There's a couple different ways to organize your volunteer management system. You can have a system where there's one person in charge, a volunteer manager, who is over designing the volunteer management for the event and overseeing everything. There are some definite pros and cons to this. I've noticed with our events that tends to not be as successful. That person ends up running around quite a bit, and they're the main point of contact. So when things go wrong, they're not as able to run to the aid of a different volunteer because they're already working in so many different capacities. So a good way to do this is to delegate to and have a volunteer program staff using either very dedicated volunteers or your paid staff to help be in supervisory positions over different areas of your event. For example, if you have a face painting booth and a bounce house and a fishing pool, you have volunteer supervisors, whether that's paid staff again or very dedicated volunteers who are feeling responsibility. They can be the ones to then be checking back in with the main volunteer manager, and that helps to lighten the load a little bit, especially for large events. When you're talking with staff, you want to make sure that they are trained on how to have a volunteer attitude. And that means knowing how to connect and communicate with volunteers and realizing how much volunteers can really add to an event or to an organization at large. And so you want to teach them a couple different tips and ways to communicate with them. It's important to talk to volunteers and ask for their input. We want to know how they're feeling and what they're thinking. Maybe they have some great ideas that we haven't thought of. We want to also validate them and let them know that what they're doing is really making a difference, and that they can feel that they have that validation. Help them feel ownership in the mission of your event, in the objectives. And that's done by asking them to do those larger tasks and helping them feel like they are right there in the thick of things, right with you. It's also important, though, to set high standards. Like I said, they want to feel challenged and they want to make sure that this event goes smoothly and is a great success, whatever your objective is, whether it's fundraising or a community outreach event. Set those high standards, make sure that there's a quality of excellence there, and that comes through orientation that we'll talk about in a second. Of course, use their names if you need to have name tags or a different way, a system of remembering names. Make sure you remember them and remember specific things about their lives that you can have a personal connection, and keep them informed throughout the day. That helps, having the different supervisors running around and checking on the volunteers. If something's going on during the event that needs to be notified to all the volunteers, that's a good way to do it. And as I've said, the volunteers are so important. One thing that I try to do as I'm managing all these volunteers throughout the year is to treat every volunteer like $1 million donor. When you have $1 million donor, you're going to treat them in the most respectful way possible and basically lay out the red carpet for them. And volunteers are donating their time and services to your cause, and it's very important to treat them as such. And actually, we've seen some volunteers turn into donors, which has always been a nice benefit. But even if they don't, it's important to help them feel just as important as somebody contributing a high dollar amount to your organization. And so now we want to get into the nitty-gritty of our event day. And that's probably why a lot of you here are listening today. One large thing that we are starting to roll out with events is having a home base for volunteers, for them to check in. Whether that's a tent or a table that's clearly marked that says volunteer check-in, having them there and having everything ready for volunteers there prior to when they arrive. That includes a sign-in sheet with their names, and right next to their names is their tasks that they've been assigned. They should know about those tasks ahead of time, but if not, that's where they're getting their orientation. All items that they will need, for example, for our sports challenge, if they need to have a clipboard or a stopwatch to keep time, all of that is prepared ahead of time and is ready to go and hand to them as they sign in. It's also important to have a schedule of the day's events so that they keep in the loop all day. And of course, those volunteers that were promised things that are tangible, like t-shirts or free food, water, make sure that they know that they can come and get that, whether that's before the event or after, and that they're receiving what they were promised. And then when they sign out, it's important to have them at this home base to have a volunteer survey. That's something we're starting to roll out as well, that is proving to be successful to see where we can improve for next time and see what they thought of that event and their experience. So we've been talking a lot about orientation. I've been hinting towards that. Orientation and training for volunteers is vital to make sure that your event works out in the way that you're hoping it to work out. You want to make sure you schedule time for this, whether that's a week in advance for large events, or maybe it's a day before and you're on the phone with your contact person, or maybe it's just right before the event as they're signing in at this check-in tent. If it's going to be a large event, it's nice to have them come and have them sit down, listen to, again, your mission, orient them on their cause that they're going to be involved in, and let them know about their tasks and all the risks involved. This brings down our risk management, our potential for injury or other situations that may arise. They'll know exactly how much time is expected of them, and where they're going to be located, what stations they're over. For example, if they've scheduled to be there from 8 to 12, you need to know that, and they need to know that they need to stay that whole time. And if they need to leave early, then they can make prior arrangements with you, and that they know that that's important. Another large thing, and we've kind of glanced over this a little bit, is good communication really just increases success for all. Schedule regular check-ins to make sure that the volunteer is getting the support that they need. And in the back of your in the back end of things with your logistics, who's going to be doing these check-ins? Are those paid staff, or are they going to be other volunteers? Is it going to be one person running and checking on all the volunteers throughout the day? And who's going to be reporting back? Who are you reporting back to? So you need those runners, and design that layout of communication prior to the event so you know exactly how everybody will stay in touch. That could be walkie-talkies as well. Schedule bathroom breaks for volunteers, etc. And then make sure you evaluate and follow up with them. Give them recognition and awards, whether that's a thank you note, maybe that's a plaque, maybe that's a badge. We have something in Utah we can nominate them to receive a certificate from the Lieutenant Governor's Office from Spencer J. Cox, and that's been great to recognize some of our very long-standing volunteers. It's so nice to receive that as a volunteer. We've had some people that say that they've been treated so nicely by the staff and the other volunteers and the participants that they just love coming back. And one volunteer said, "You don't realize how much volunteering here does for me." And we didn't realize that was something that they were experiencing. We just thought they were coming and having a great time, but we didn't realize the impact that they were receiving as they're involved in our cause. And that was so great to have that feedback. So using those surveys, talking with them afterwards, evaluating your success. Of course, you're going to track your hours, and you're going to be reporting in maybe annual reports on the impact of those service hours and how much that helped in your fundraising efforts, for example. But it's also nice to hear those comments from volunteer surveys, talking with your volunteer supervisors, and also with the people that participated in the event if they had a good experience with the volunteers that were running the event. So these are just a couple tips and tricks. We've got our resources listed here that helped us out a little bit in this presentation. Feel free to check that out. And we're happy to answer questions. I know we're going to do a Q&A, but if there's other questions, feel free to reach out to myself or to our Vice President of Development here at Kids on the Move. And it's been great to share some of our experiences and hope that maybe if you have some other ideas, we'd love to hear those as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Sydnee, for this great webinar and presentation. And Kids on the Move, awesome events. I've been to one myself, and for the Corporate Sports Challenge, and it was a blast, and the volunteers knew exactly what they were doing the whole time. So it was awesome. We do have a couple of minutes for some questions that we'd like to answer. Let's go ahead and pull those up. Let's see here. Let's see. All right, so we have a question here that asks, what if your event or organization is very grassroots and is not feasible to have a registration platform for events?
Oh, that's a good one. Sometimes we feel, even though we're a large event organizer, nonprofit, sometimes we do just use that grassroots. Word of mouth is great. Having your volunteers recruit other volunteers is nice to get them involved, bringing their friends. Hey, if you're going to come, can you bring a couple friends with you? As far as registration goes, maybe you don't have a website signed up, but you can have what is just as easy as an Excel spreadsheet and keeping track of them and their contact information. That's a nice way to keep it organized.
Perfect. You talked a little bit about this, but how did you find corporations that have social responsibility programs?
It's kind of been a ongoing process. We are involved in a couple different networking groups. There's a group here in the area called Corporate Alliance, who actually schedules networking lunches to meet other corporations. And we as a nonprofit get to attend that and meet business owners and other representatives. We're out in the community a lot doing different outreach programs and outreach efforts. and it's really just word of mouth too. Sometimes, like I said, we've for example, we've been out around for almost 30 years, and so some of the people who have gone on to start up businesses around here, they are actually contacting us and wanting to get involved. But as far as your large corporations, even just uh, we've even gone as far as just to Google social responsibility. I would try some of your very large corporations. Like I said, Adobe has a great program, and Kohl's, the department store. There's Target, there's Walmart, there's Goldman Sachs. There's so many that are there that you'd be surprised have something in the works behind the scenes. I hope that helps.
That's great. And you were mentioning about sending out a survey to volunteers. So how should that survey go out to them? Is it a form? Is it an email? And when should you get it out to the volunteers?
Right. We've done it a couple different ways. We've emailed it out to just our volunteer database at large. How are we doing as a whole? And that hasn't been as successful as day of when they're signing out, having just as simple as a quarter sheet of paper with a couple questions that they can hurry and circle their answers. It's good to have both numerical responses on a scale of 1 to 10, for example. How much did you enjoy this volunteer experience? And then having some short answers to hear their specific answers. And then they can just turn that into the person running the volunteer check-in tent. And so hopefully, if you come up with a way that works even better, I'd love to hear that too.
And then we'll do one final question here, but what suggestions do you have for a volunteer recognition event?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm glad that got brought up because I didn't get to cover that as much as I wanted to. We actually organize every year something called an appreciation breakfast for our donors, our board members, community members, and some volunteers that have really made a difference. And we make it a nice event. We invite them for breakfast. We get it catered. We have an exciting guest speaker, and we just let them know how appreciated they really were. We do that in November, around the month that we're focusing on gratitude, but that can be done anytime. That's a great question.
Well, that's great. Again, Sydnee, thank you so much for your time today and for the great presentation. And for all of those out there who joined us for the webinar today, we'll be sending out a recording of this shortly after, hopefully a little bit later today. And thank you so much, and hope you join us next time and can apply these things to your own volunteer management efforts. Thank you.
Thank you.